Hello again. It's the second anniversary, or birthday, or creation day, or whatever, of my Panther Chameleon Vivarium, and I wanted to take an opportunity to showcase it at 2 years of age. I will show how it's progressed, some maintenance that I need to do as a result of its age, and I'll also answer some questions that I get about the setup suitability for chameleons, and the various type of plants that I use with Spicoli. I adopted Spicoli the chameleon as a rescue back in 2017, and he has been in this enclosure for as long as I have had him. Initially, he just had a couple pothos angulifera trees, but 2 years ago I decided to redo the background and add some additional plants and climbing branches for a better looking setup that would also offer Spicoli more climbing opportunities and more plants to interact with. I also switched to an egg crate false bottom, and I added plumbing to the vivarium as well as a Mist King system. You can see my original video that I posted about it up here. This vivarium has been doing very well since I originally set it up. The plants have grown in nicely, Spicoli has flourished, and I've even had blooming orchids for about the last 9 straight months. The only issues that I've had is that I somehow managed to introduce orchid snails, which have not been a problem for most of my plants, but they did manage to kill off my jewel orchids, unfortunately. I've also had greenhouse millipedes, which have never been a problem in a setup before, but a few of Spicoli's climbing branches have been absolutely devoured by them. I think it's because I've been using grapewood, and grapewood doesn't hold up very well in humid conditions. Additionally, Exoterra makes good vivariums, but terrible vivarium tops, and mine is completely rusted and deformed from years of use. Today I'm going to trim the plants back to make sure Spicoli has room to actually use his climbing branches, add in a few manzanita climbing branches I collected, and also replace the rusted top with a new top that I've waterproofed with spray paint. First, let's trim the enclosure back a bit. Though I like the looks of an overgrown setup, the faster growing plants tend to choke out the slower growers, and they also take up a lot of space that Spicoli could be using to climb. Spicoli does like thick growth, and he will use it to hide when he wants to feel secure, but I try to have some open areas in the vivarium where he can bask under his UVB and freely move about. Now I'm going to add in some additional climbing branches to replace Spicoli's old grapewood branches that have not survived the humid understory. This time I will be using manzanita, which is a much denser wood and should hold it better over time. Once I've cut everything back, I like to replant some of the cuttings that I have to encourage a thick understory growth. Next, I'm going to finally replace this rusted out top. I don't know why Exoterra's tops don't come pre-finished with waterproof paint like their screen cages do, but I purchased a replacement and painted it myself. After I painted it, I left it outside my shed for 3 weeks before installation to ensure it was cured and there was no residual smell. I used Krylon Fusion because I have seen it recommended on herpetology and saltwater reef forums, and I've also used it in my enclosures in the past without any incident. It's just important to make sure that it airs out for long enough that it's no longer off-gassing. While we're at it, I should probably clean the glass as well. During quarantine, I haven't been as consistent as I used to about getting reverse osmosis water for my vivariums. The tap water where I live is high quality, and it's what I personally drink, so I'm not worried about using it for my plants or animals, but it does leave water spots more readily than reverse osmosis water. I use white vinegar to dissolve any mineral spots, and then I rinse it off with regular water. I've had a few comments where reviewers tell me that my enclosure is too small. While it's always nice to keep your animals in the largest enclosure you are able to, this enclosure is appropriately sized for an adult Panther Chameleon. The enclosure is twice as large as the minimum recommended size from Reptiles magazine, and about on par with the size recommended by chameleon forums. It is also larger than the minimum recommended size in the published husbandry guides I own, including Ferguson's The Panther Chameleon, the ABS Chameleons, and the Chameleon Handbook. If you want to use a solid-sided enclosure for more climate control over your animals, this is about the largest enclosure that you can currently buy commercially. I also have one of the 4-foot by 2-foot mesh cages that many keepers use. I use it as Spicoli's outdoor enclosure during nice weather. Personally, I do not like the 4-foot by 2-foot as much because it does not have as much horizontal space for climbing. In artificial conditions, UVB and heat from external heat emitters do not penetrate very deeply into the enclosure anyway. As a result, I've noticed that chameleons that I've kept don't really like to hang out towards the bottom of a tall cage, making additional vertical space less useful than additional horizontal space. I do have plans to upgrade my chameleon setup to a custom-built enclosure that will be truly massive. However, my current clinical responsibilities don't leave a ton of time for projects of that magnitude at the moment, unfortunately, and I'm also not the most experienced at working with wood or with glass. My immediate plan is to make a couple smaller enclosures first as practice for my ultimate goal of building a massive bioactive chameleon habitat. I'll be making videos of all of these builds, so if you can tolerate my erratic posting habits, you will eventually be rewarded with more cool projects. I also receive a constant drip of comments telling me that I should know better than to keep chameleons in glass. I'm pretty tolerant of most husbandry questions and critiques, even those that I believe to be pretty ill-informed, but this one is one of the dumbest comments that I regularly get, and it's a personal pet peeve of mine, especially since I link to an article discussing this exact topic on every chameleon video that I make. I will be making a video dedicated to this subject at some point in the future, and I will link it here when it's finished, but in the meantime, the summary is that you can't keep chameleons or any fragile arboreal species in an aquarium. We will define an aquarium as a solid-sided, airtight enclosure. You can keep chameleons, as well as epiphytic orchid species, in solid-sided enclosures that are appropriately ventilated. Vents near the bottom, combined with a screen top and heat lights at the top, will create a chimney effect as the hot air rises to pull fresh air into the enclosure. The solid sides also give you more control over humidity, which helps to prevent dehydration. One of the most common causes of death in captive tropical lizards is renal failure, and chronic subclinical dehydration due to poor control over humidity contributes to renal failure. So stop telling me to switch to a screen cage. Spicoli has been in this enclosure for 3 years now. He's doing very well. For every message that I get on social media telling me to use mesh, I get another message from someone who uses mesh, who has seen that I'm a veterinarian and is asking me to tell them why their chameleon is dying. It's hard to know without a necropsy, and I can't give medical advice on animals I haven't examined, but my best guess is that your chameleon is sick or dying from chronic kidney disease due to dehydration, because if you live in a dry climate, it's very difficult for inexperienced keepers to maintain appropriate humidity in a screen cage. As always, I have linked to the Chris Anderson article, Chameleons in Glass, down below in the description. I would recommend reading that if you have any questions. Several of you have asked for a list of what plants I keep with Spicoli. Well, I used to have 50 different species, but I've let a bunch of them die, either because they were outcompeted by another species, or they just weren't doing as well as I thought maybe they should be. But I will list all the ones that I still have, and I will list them now. Alright, you made it to the end of the video, and your prize for your loyalty is to be asked to subscribe to my channel again. I know, I am also disappointed.